From the Marvel Universe to Doctor Who, from Star Trek to the Fast and Furious, we'll hear from a visual effects pro who's been on the front lines of some of the biggest franchises ever. This week on VFX for Indies. Welcome to VFX for Indies, a podcast about the intersection of visual effects and independent filmmaking. I'm your host, Paul DeNigris, VFX artist, filmmaker, and CEO of boutique visual effects shop Foxtrot X-Ray. With me today is Pedro Andrade, founder of CompLaIr and a VFX professional whose career goes back to 2013 and Star Trek Into Darkness and hasn't stopped since. Welcome to the podcast, Pedro.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. On this show, our goal is to bring on guests like Pedro to share their insights into visual effects and film production without going too deep into the weeds of tech talk, with the goal of educating filmmakers who are relatively new to using VFX. If you like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe to stay updated as we release new episodes. And you can find our back catalog of episodes at VFX for Indies. As I mentioned, Pedro is the founder of CompLaIr, which has been an invaluable resource for compositors looking to grow their careers and move up into supervisory roles. I'm excited to chat with Pedro today since I've been watching his CompLaIr YouTube content for a while. So let's get started. Pedro, why don't you tell us a bit about your background and your education and what brought you into the world of VFX?
Sure. So actually, that's a funny story because I was not meant to be in visual effects. Visual effects happened sort of like by accident. As I normally say, the true artist in my family is my brother, because he's like a comics artist that, maybe with the name you can get to the person I'm talking about. But I was always involved in art since I remember. I was very much involved in music, and that's exactly what I wanted to pursue. Visual effects was not something that was in the picture, but I was always very, on one hand creative, but on the other hand also very technical. I have that about me, and there's no denying in that whatsoever. So, long story short, what happened was, there was a point in my career that I wanted to do something related with music, but you know, uh, you know, family pressures or even like society pressures or whatever you want to call it. I chose like a more traditional path, and I ended up studying engineering. So I ended up like working as a mechanical engineer for a while. I'm Portuguese, so this was still in Portugal, and although I was working as an engineer, the creative side was always like conflicting with that side of things, and for me that was like something that was really killing me, and I figured out that I need to figure this out for myself, otherwise I'm going to be very unhappy with my life. So there came a point in which I think by year three into engineering, I decided to, okay, I'm gonna let go of everything and I'm just gonna pursue my career in music. And at that time, I didn't know exactly what to do, but I had a strong suspicion that probably that would had to do something with recording, because I always liked music production and especially production, but also mixing. And so that was like the path that I wanted to basically to see myself as the job of my dreams. And so I decided to basically make something about it and start to investigate where should I do that kind of stuff. The world seems so big and so small at the same time, right? This was many, many years ago. This was, I hate to say it, but I think this was like 15, 17 years ago. And so at that time, I decided to, okay, I'm going to have engineering as my last year on a certain year. I'm going to go to work in a completely different place, which is Angola, which is in Africa. And I want to make this as my last year. I'm going to earn as much money as I can possibly earn so I can support myself for what's to come, because most likely I'm not going to earn money for a long time being or trying to pursue music production, right? And at that time, I didn't know exactly where. I was debating between the States and in the States, that would be LA or London. And then due to the visa processes and stuff like that, we decided to go to London. At that time, I also had started a relationship with my now wife, back then girlfriend, and far from the ideal scenario in all types of circumstances. But we both had a dream, which was we want to make something different for our lives. And because London was so much close to Portugal and we didn't have the visas to care about, we decided to go to London with nothing but our dreams, basically. This sounds like a very cheesy kind of story, but that's exactly how we went. And so, my wife, her name is Monica. She's a designer, and she was involved in the 3D visualization of things at that time, and she wanted to pursue that side of things a bit more. And so what happened was she ended up going into escape studios to study more that craft. And I was basically trying to make it as a music producer in London. So basically, our nights and days were always about like watching, music acts just to try to sign some clients, right?
Right.
That was tough in some aspects, more for Monica than it was for me. But it was a very fun time, nevertheless. So what happened at some point was Monica was just asking me opinions about like what she was doing, instead of like certain shots or whatever. I didn't know what the shot was back then, but it was just a picture for me, right? And I didn't know like the software or anything about that kind of stuff, but I would ask her like, how can I change this aspect or that aspect? Just tell me where to push the buttons. And then she would tell me, and I would make my version of what it seemed to me to be the right thing or the thing that would sit better, you know, uh, for my eyes, right? And then I realized that that process actually was very close to, on one hand, engineering in terms of like how the software looked like. We were talking about Nuke at that time because she was finalizing some shots. Although she was not into compositing, she was a 3D modeler, but she was like finalizing the shots in Nuke. And I realized that, wait a second, this has a lot to do with engineering, like with circuitry and stuff like that. And at the same time, it had um, the same mental, how can I say, discipline when it comes to music mixing. Because if you think about it, music mixing is basically process like hundreds of tracks individually for a stereo output, right? So compositing is in some way very similar to that if you think about it, which is you process different elements one by one to a single image, right? So that kind of mentality was very much aligned with the things that I already, had in me, I guess. So I was like, okay, look, music is not really working for me because it's a super competitive market and there's not a lot of work out there. Um, Financial stability was not a thing, so I have nothing to lose, so I'm just gonna study by myself for I think it was 3 months, but I studied like really hard, like 15, 16 hours a day nonstop. But I didn't have any expectations. I was just like, okay, let's see where this takes me. I know that I'm a very focused guy, so I can put like the focus like seriously, no no breaks, no nothing.
Hmm.
So I gave myself like 3 months to see what would happen, and then I had like some sort of like surreal, which at that time I didn't know that there was a thing, but I was told that you need to produce something to show your
Right.
work, right? So that's exactly what I did. And then because Monica at that time was already working in a visual effects house in London, she had some contacts of people, production and stuff like that. And there was like a party in which we were at, like a housewarming party of a producer that was working at that time at Jellyfish Pictures, and she told me that they were taking interns, and they were taking interns in compositing, and I was like, all right, look, I just produced this, so let's see, well, you tell me whether or not this is something that you would like to know more about. And she said, oh, this is perfect. And then without me expecting once again anything, I believe it was like on the following week I was called for an interview and I got my unpaid internship at that time. So that's basically how it happened.
Wow.
So
Okay,
it was
that's
not
a
programmed whatsoever.
no. I can totally relate. Listening to you talk, we have so many parallels you wouldn't
Is
even
that right?
believe. Yeah, well, so I always say that I'm a child of Spielberg and Lucas. Like I saw Star Wars and then Close Encounters, and that's what made me want to be a filmmaker. And so my whole childhood, I was drawing spaceships and writing stories about the spaceships and the people in the spaceships and the robots in the spaceships and all of this stuff. And so, my academic career, all my advisors and my parents pushed me into aerospace engineering. So my first 2 semesters of undergrad, I was a mechanical engineering major,
Ah, okay.
and I added one film class every semester, and it was that basic filmmaking class, and I was sitting editing. I was editing on Super 8 film, with scissors and tape and a little splicer and a little viewer. That I just had that moment of zen where it was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Kind of like you, where it was like, the arts drew you away from engineering. And I have met so many people in the VFX industry who started either engineering or computer science, right?
Computer science, yes. Engineering, I know some, but not that much.
I
Not that many.
so I'm a little older than you, no
Yep.
secret. So a lot of the folks that I met early in my career were like both of us, who had come over from engineering into computer animation or into compositing, because it is that right brain left brain, creative and technical
Yeah.
thing that engineering also sort of tickles, right? Engineering leans more heavily technical, but there is a creative aspect to engineering.
For
And
sure. I think the
yeah,
creative aspect is actually very much aligned with what compositing work is all about, specifically, but VFX in general, or technical arts in general, because you need the creative technical expertise to try to find the best solution. And although we're talking about something technical, there's something very creative also about like what is the best solution on the technical side of things, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's one of the things that I love about the film industry and about film in general is you've got the full spectrum, right? You've got people who are writer directors who are 100% creative. They don't really know technical stuff. You start talking to them about frame rates and lookup tables and bit depth and what any sort of technical thing, and their eyes glaze over because they are super
Yeah.
creative. They're super like just focused on storytelling and all of that. And then you've got at the way opposite end of the spectrum, you've got people who are grips and gaffers who, yes, they're creative, but they lean much more heavily into the technical side because it's all about the nuts and bolts of it. And VFX lives in that in between.
Correct.
When I was teaching, I always used to tell my students, like, VFX people, we are the Renaissance people of the film industry because we have to know everything. We have to know storytelling. We have to know lighting. We have to know cameras. We have to know lenses. We have to know why the camera's here, not just how to place the camera here, but why is it here? What are we trying to say with this lighting? What are we trying to say with, the details in the background of a matte painting? All of that stuff is telling the story, but we also have to have all of this technical skill to be able to be on the box and actually execute the ideas. So that's really fascinating. And I
Yep.
definitely see a lot of overlap with music too, music production, because yeah, it is creative and technical. Some of the folks that I admire the most in the music industry, they are incredible technicians. Like I'm a massive fan of Steely Dan, Donald Fagen, and Walter Becker, right? Two incredibly creative guys who also like just absolutely killed themselves in the mixing suite to make every track, every note, every single thing perfect. And I could definitely see in an alternate universe there is a successful music producer named Pedro Andrade who is very
Well, I
very
did some.
similar.
I did some stuff. Yeah, I did some stuff. I can send you some of this stuff after. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think what I was taking. So actually, let me take a step back. So between music production and music mixing, both of them are very technical,
Yeah,
but one of them is more technical than other, and they're both creative as well. So I liked very much the music mixing because it had again what I think compositing gave me, which is the right balance between the two. Right. When it comes to music production, there's different styles of different music producers, of course, in the same way that there's different kinds of VFX supervisors. Some of them are more technical, some of them are more artistic, and there's no right or wrong with this. It's just like different approach, right? But I wanted to really get my hands dirty to try to create something with the technical aspect of things. For example, when I hear a snare, there's multiple ways of how you can make a snare sound, right? So you can either commit that like when you are tracking, or you can change that or and you can change that slightly on the mixing stage, right? So I'm just giving like this as a like
Yeah.
a quick analogy, but yeah, that's what I found also, the analogy between that side of that world and visual effects, because again, as you said, there's like the right combination, at least for me and perhaps for you as well, the right combination between the technical aspect and the creative aspect. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's, as when I'm on the box, I'm a compositor like you, nuke guy, and my favorite times when I'm working as a nuke compositor are when I've got a creative problem that I need to create a technical solution for.
that's right.
That's super fun because then it's activating both sides of the brain, and it's I'm in my happy place, much like I was when I was sitting surrounded by tape and razor blades and Super 8 film and a,
Yeah,
and a little viewer in college. It was that I'm having to master all this technical detail stuff to create to bring across my vision into reality. So
that's right.
that first intern gig, then how did that launch your career? Like, where did you go from there?
I mean, from there, everything happened like super quickly for me. And only much later, I start to collect the pieces to try to understand how or why this happened so quickly for me. Because what happened was, after Jellyfish, I think I stayed there for like maybe in total maybe 6 months or something like that across different contracts and projects. And then I landed at Pixelmondo when they were finishing up Star Trek, and so that was like, I guess at that time, like the big major production that I was involved in. There was a lot of details about like what happened to that show at that time in that company that I'm not gonna get into right now because it's a little bit out of the scope of what we're trying to discuss here. But in any case, after that, then I went to different places, and at that time, one thing that I was doing um, was freelancing, which, as I normally say, it's not the best place to start a career being freelancer, because normally people hire freelancers to solve problems that they want to be solved. They want it to be solved quickly, right? And you, as a freelancer, when you're starting out, there's a lot of stuff that you don't know, right? So
Right.
it's not the best place to start, but one thing that I think I got a lot from starting that way was the fact that I worked in many different places. I got to know like a lot of people very early on, being exposed to different pipelines, different ways of doing things, trying to, force myself to fit into this picture. After being exposed to so many different, studios and projects and people, pipelines as well. And then I start crafting my own way of doing things, I guess, also taking into account my past backgrounds. So I guess I naturally double down on my differences as opposed to try basically be someone like someone that I knew or something like that.
Mhm.
Of course, all of us, we got influenced by the people that are surrounding us, obviously, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But at the same time, I always sort of like felt that as I'm sort of like an outsider because my background was so different. So I think in hindsight, what I did was I doubled down on my differences, as I said before, and craft my way, doubling down on those differences and making things happen in a different way in comparison with what other people were doing,
Mhm.
for example. And I think that that's basically what got me into, at some point, at Milk Visual Effects, after going through many different companies. I remember Base Black was one of them, MPC at that time as well, in which I worked on Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. And then I ended up at Milk. And when I got at Milk, Milk was at that time a new studio that was born out of the Mill. And there was a lot of stuff that, being a new studio, the company didn't have like things developed in the way that they have it, for example, today, right? So because of my technical background and my proactive, I think, attitude at that time, naturally speaking, I was not like looking into impress A, B, or C. I was just trying to solve problems that I thought that they needed to be solved.
Mhm.
But then I was, invited very early on to, become a comp supervisor, and that's basically how everything started for me when it comes to supervision roles.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go next. You made that jump really quickly. I mean, at least
Yeah,
at least on paper, right? Looking at your IMDb, there's only a few years between your first role, your first credited role as a compositor, to all of a sudden you're comp supervisor. Like that, it's super fast. So that obviously speaks volumes to, one, right place, right time, but also right person with right skills, being you, inserted into the workflow at Milk. So that's amazing. What are so just take like a macro view. What are some of your biggest career highlights? Like the shows or the shots that you loved working on, people that you loved working with or learn the most from. Just go anywhere with this answer.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in many different projects and the biggest projects in the world. You've highlighted some of them in the intro, and people can look at my IMDb. But to be honest with you, I don't have like a special recollection from Project A, B, or C because all of them were different. What I save better memories is like the teams or the people that I worked with, and luckily enough, I think I saved the best memories of people in leadership that I worked with, and all of them were women. So maybe that tells you something that maybe we need more women in our industry, because it's not as diversified as I think it should be. And the best memories that I have is people in leadership roles that I learned a ton from. Starting from the one that appointed me to become a comp supervisor for the first time, which is Sarah Bennett, so Oscar winner. And so I learned a ton with her in many different ways. Not so much on the technical nitty gritty kind of stuff, but just like you know, sometimes it's like unspoken things that you learn from, just the way that you perceive a certain role or you talk with someone. You know what I mean? I think at that time, one of the things that I've developed quite a lot was that maybe I had that already in me in some aspects, but the soft skills in terms of like the way that you push someone to do something in the ways that they are the first ones to be surprised about, like, oh, can I do this? Yeah, apparently I can. You know what I mean? So that kind of stuff, because being in a leadership role, that's exactly what you need. Part of the role is nurture the team that you have, making them achieve even more in comparison to what they have in their minds about like what they are capable of, and then deliver the show with the right specs, even surprising the client if we can, of course, at the right time. That's basically the job, isn't it? But you need to have the team, and having a team is not just okay. I have a team, and then what, right? So most people, that's basically what they are.
Right.
But answering your question, I don't have like a specific story to tell about Project A, B, or C. I can tell you maybe that one of the shows that pushed me more um, for the development of my creativity when it comes to the technical side of things, the thing that we were talking about just now,
Mm-hmm.
was perhaps Doctor Who, which is a show that I don't like at all. I'm not a fan. I didn't grow up with it. I don't like the show, so I'm telling you this straight up,
Sure.
right? Uh, but at the same time, because the ideas were so crazy and the budget was so minimal, it really pushed your creativity beyond anything that, if it wasn't for that fact, possibly you won't be able to tap into that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So that, I think, awoken something in me at that time, that I think I had already, and I had developed something, but I think he put that kind of mentality, that mindset, on steroids. And so from that point onwards, I think it informed me, or it pushed me into a different way of doing things. um, Again, was not only directly related with the show, but without a doubt, that show pushed my creativity, like in this way, when it comes to the technical approaches, or try to find the technicalities to make something possible when apparently it's impossible.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like a limited budget to push you to be more
Yeah.
creative, and that's why I love working in independent films. As much as I love Guardians of the Galaxy, you can see I've got the orb right there.
Yeah.
I've got some action figures somewhere. Yeah, as much as I love all of that sort of stuff, and I also, I mean, I like Doctor Who, so I won't hold that against you though. I'm a
A
Whovian
lot of
from
people
from
do.
way back.
I'm
Oh,
the odd.
obviously,
Yeah,
it's
I'm the
been
one.
around forever.
I'm
Yeah,
the one.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Tom Baker was my doctor, and then And then I introduced my one of my sons to Doctor Who, and Matt Smith became his doctor.
All right.
So yeah, so we
Cool.
love that show, and love how wacky and off center it can be, and how
Yeah.
yeah, historically since the very beginning it has had not enough budget to execute the ideas that they wanted to do, and yet they still managed to tell pretty interesting stories and do some really interesting stuff. And that that's a really good parallel to the average independent filmmaker who wants to use VFX in their movies, right? They don't have Marvel's budget, right? So they're lucky if they have Doctor Who's budget. And
Yeah.
how do we help them, get their ideas across with the tools that we have on the VFX side of thing? How do we get that across? So you're now a comp supervisor, and you're continuing to work up. You become comp supervisor at Cinesite, head of compositing at MPC. These are like some of the biggest and best known companies in the industry, right? So again, keeping that indie film mission that I've got here in mind, let's talk about some of the stuff you've seen in your leadership roles at these studios. What are some things you've encountered that can be applied to that low to medium budget indie film space? Whether it's stuff you picked up on Doctor Who or other things, because every show, even a Marvel show, I guarantee you run out of time and run out of money at some point, and you've got to
Mm.
pull some sort of solution out of your hat.
Oh, for sure, especially when it comes to big budget productions like that, which
Yeah,
some people that perhaps are not as experienced working on those type of productions, they might think that it's the other way around, but in fact, no.
yeah,
More money sometimes that doesn't equate necessarily speaking to better planning. And so, answering your question, I would say that planning and management is, I think, what's like it's what's at the center of a successful project, or the other way around. Most of the times it's the other way around because this lacks. So I would say that um, the parallel in terms of like what are the best things that either a very big production movie can have in the same way that a low budget can have to make the success of that picture come through. Take into account the process of making it, not so much the picture itself. I think it has to do with management, which is like one of the biggest things that I think, or the biggest thing that lacks in our industry overall, whether it's big production or small productions. Because if you cannot, look into the numbers in the right way, then there will come a point in which you're just running against time all the time. In the beginning, it might not feel like that, but there will come a point in which you will feel like that, independent of either the budget is really big or really small, because eventually it will shrink, right? So the problem is the
right,
same. Yeah.
right. So what's a VFX challenge, like a specific VFX challenge that you've encountered that's pretty consistent, regardless of the budget level? And how can filmmakers or producers, management, how can they be better prepared for that?
I think more the tech than the getting into the technicalities
Yeah,
of the aspect of the craft. I think it has. I'm going to repeat myself, but it's really looking to the numbers, making sure that the team that you have can really deliver that the scope of the work that was agreed on when by. So planning not only making sure that it's possible, but also everything that goes in between, like the planning until you then from the moment you receive things to do until the moment you deliver everything, right? So things like, when can I, like, basically, let me take a step back. It's basically the intention, I think, that the goal that normally lacks is making sure that the numbers tells you whether or not something is possible, more than just your experience. Most people rely on their experience because they may say, for example, if you're not working a new client, for example, Paul, the client may say to you, look, here's the budget, here's the total scope of the work, and here's when we need to have it by, right? And then you will say to them, without, if you don't base your answering in numbers, you say, look, I don't think this will be possible because of this and this. There was a time in which we had a similar situation and things were not possible. And then what the client will say, if it's only words, is going to say exactly the opposite. What do you mean? I had a very similar situation last time with another vendor, and they were able to make it work. So I don't know what you're talking about. So until you get out of that frame between like you saying something and they say something opposite, and start really dealing with real numbers that cannot be, as I normally say, a pesky thing about numbers is that they don't lie, right? So you really need to to get into specific things about like really making sure that the team that you have in number is really the team number that you're really gonna need to make it work, not only from start to finish, but like how do you crew up basically in the middle in the middle of that development, and also knowing with the team that you already have when by you really can deliver something with the team that you have. And if you do your math, which you're talking about simple math anyway, right? But you can really inform the client of, look, this is the problem. I really want to make this work, but take into account, like, for example, the average days per shot that we've both agreed on and the team that I have available
Mm-hmm.
for the budget, right? This is what the numbers say to me. If you have other numbers, I mean, I'm happy to discuss, right? But these are my numbers. If you have other numbers, please show me because I would love to make it work. But normally, if something is presented in this way, not only the client will be rest assured that you're looking into the things in the right way, but you're also working as a team, you and them, right? For this to really see the light of day in the best way possible without opinions or last time this happened, so it was possible, or last time this happened and it was not possible, right? We need to get out of that, frame of mind, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not guesswork, right? Like
No.
things take how long they take, and labor costs how much it costs, and it's yeah, the number, as you say, the numbers don't lie. In my experience, what happens a lot, particularly in the indie film space, is either filmmakers aren't budgeting for their VFX or they're not budgeting realistically for their VFX. I just had a film where we were asked to, to bid on hundreds of shots, and it the number turned out to be way larger than the producer was expecting, and it was like, but you knew it was hundreds of shots when you turned the cut over to us. Like, you should have expected a number in this neighborhood. And then it's like, oh, well, I have to go back to my other producer to discuss it. Well, if you guys are just now discussing your VFX budget, your system's broken.
Yep.
Yeah, it
Yep.
makes it really, really hard. Then you're asking your VFX vendor to either work for less money than it will take, in which case that is an untenable solution. I mean, how many VFX companies have we seen in the modern era close up because budgets are too tight, for
Yep.
what they're being
Some
asked
of
to
them
do.
really recently, by the way.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, and we'll get into that. We'll talk a little bit about the current state of the industry. But yeah, like it's still, it's a business, right? And it's for whatever reason, VFX kind of gets gets short shrift on budgets, unless, obviously bigger productions, they're going into it with a certain mindset. They have a certain number that they know, they have to set aside for VFX. But a lot of times, clients are coming to us, and VFX is an afterthought. VFX is something that we discovered we have to paint this out, and we need to fix this wardrobe issue, or we need to fix this production design issue. And can we do all that? Sure, we could do it. Can you afford to pay for,
Yep.
200 shots of fixing the color of somebody's outfit or something? So yeah, I mean, that's a good segue. Where, what are it's a weird time in VFX right now. What are you seeing on your side of the pond, as far as like what are the biggest challenges right now? And please tell me there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We're gonna come out of this dark period and get back to work.
I mean, we one thing that we can all agree on is, without even getting into like really market trends and lines and stuff like that, we can agree that there seems to be like a bounce back of the industry right now, right? Maybe in some parts of the globe, not as much, but certainly we are seeing this globally speaking in general, right? It took like a long time for this bounce to happen,
Mm-hmm.
which tells you right there about the fragility of the filmmaking industry overall. Not only visual effects. Visual effects is just a part of the filmmaking industry, right? But filmmaking in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I don't know if you saw this, but maybe your audience, maybe some of them know, some of them they don't know. Maybe they will find this insightful. But there's a show on Netflix called "The Movies That Made Us" that I think it illustrates really well, like how films are made, and everything goes wrong for many different reasons. And all these movies that we all love and grew up with, I mean, it's some of them are it's a miracle that they happen because the odds were not to their favor whatsoever.
Right.
So so again, this illustrates like the fragility of how filmmaking is, which is very messy overall. Which it's a little bit of part of the nature of filmmaking in general. But answering your question more directly, yes, the industry is bouncing back. There's definitely, we all can see that it's taking longer than people have anticipated. But if you look into specific articles when it comes to the visual effects market overall and filmmaking in general, but specifically about visual effects, growth is projected for the next few years.
Hmm.
So it's definitely something that is not going to go away whatsoever. I think it's going to develop in a different way, perhaps from what we've seen until now, also taking into account the technology advancements and all that kind of stuff, which also happened, in the past. Visual effects as a thing is also a fruit of technology as well. You know what I mean? In the way that we see it these days, right? Very different when it was 60s and 50s and even before that. It was more about like imagination, but all of those things they took some technology anyway, right?
Right.
So now we are seeing like a big leap in terms of like the technology advancement. But in any case, I think it's going to be more a tool, which I'm not denying that perhaps it's going to cut some jobs, but I don't think that it's necessarily speaking a bad thing, which is a very controversial thing to say. So let me explain a little bit further. What I want to say by this is that if there's a process or a technology that can substitute a human being from doing repetitive tasks or tasks
Hmm.
that they're just like mechanical, then what this means is that that human is going to be way more useful on doing something that are more human. You know what I mean?
Right.
For example, when it comes to creativity and stuff like that, right? So I don't think that being in the long term, I don't think that is a bad thing. In the short term, maybe you're going to see some disruption as we are already seeing, but it's part of a change, I guess. So I think the goal and the trick is to be aware of all these things, but also have like a strategy behind all these changes and how you see yourself in terms of like what your goal is.
Yeah, my fear is that the folks that are funding a lot of this machine learning and generative AI technology, they're they're after a black box solution that they can type a prompt into and get a movie, and they're not focused on really solving the problem. We don't consumers, I don't think, want to watch AI generated content.
Hmm.
Right? It's a gimmick. It doesn't really have a heart or soul or a sense of um, spontaneity, or it doesn't speak to the human condition in a way that the best art does. We want tools to help us clean up green screens. We want tools to help us rotoscope. We want tools
Yeah.
to help us estimate depth, to relight shots. We don't want tools that are going to put us out of the creative work, right? And that's what I wish the folks that were funding this stuff got. I think they would get a lot less pushback from us as an industry and from society in general, artists in general, if they were like, yeah, not pursuing these tools and solutions that can create something from whole cloth, but instead something that's more actually useful to us.
Yeah, I agree with you, but at the same time, I think we are in the state like any like big disruption. There's a moment in which there's a lot of experimentation, like
Right.
okay, let's see how far we can take this, and then it's like a curve. Like you take it too far, it doesn't work. You take it like really down again. I mean, maybe we're not utilizing technology as we should. So let's go back a notch. You know what I mean? And maybe there will come a point in everything, like all this thing like this that I'm talking about, it's going to stabilize, and it will be part of our tool set, I
Yeah.
guess. And some of these things will generating images for us that in the past maybe artists were doing. You know what I mean? But I don't think that is necessarily speaking a bad thing. Again, it all depends on the level of what we're talking about. But I
Mhm.
think it's really possible that not right now, but in the future, that some of the things that we're going to watch, we don't know whether they were produced by a machine or with
Right.
some human input. I think that's going to happen, not to the full extent of what a movie will be about, exactly because of the reasons that you're saying.
Mhm.
But in some, there will be some things that you don't even. I don't think you even gonna want to question whether or not it's something done by a human or not. It's something that it's there and it helps to tell the story. So for you as a human in your human brain, I think that will be enough for you to just take it as it comes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, uh, my trepidation about that is, when you've got AI involved in creating, you're taking away the capacity for humans to make mistakes and to find
Yeah.
happy accidents, right? So yeah, I don't want that. I don't want AI to take away those happy accidents of actors that click, or something that some compositor accidentally put into their shot that improves it, or some discovery that some comp supervisor, right, creating a new a new node, for his team to use, is going to discover. Like, that's what makes all of this nonsense that we deal with on this planet worth it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. At the same time, if I
Yeah.
can stir the mix a little bit, stir the pot a little
please,
bit,
please.
um, perhaps you're not considering that those tools, talking about like from a standpoint of a story only,
Yeah,
right? Those tools perhaps can give you ideas on how to pursue different angles that maybe you didn't consider before. Not
absolutely.
doing everything for you, but maybe giving you a hint of why not pursuing this angle here, and then it will be up to you. I think where we both agree with this, and I don't think we are disagreeing, by the way, but
No,
I
not at
think
all. Not at all.
the common point, I think, regarding this specific point is the control that humans have to have regarding where they want to take things. Yes,
Agreed.
here's this angle, here's this solution. Do you want to take it? Do you want to pursue this? Yes or no? Up to
Yeah.
you, right? But it should be something that, of course, humans should always have a say on, because otherwise, there's no control whatsoever. And I think, again, when it comes to AI tools, or AI in general, one thing that we all know that is lacking is exactly rules
Yeah.
for it overall, right?
Yeah.
In whatever field we're talking about, whether it's like medical side of things or creative side of things, as we're talking about here, there's no regulation. And I think for the coming years, I think it's inevitable that we see some regulation around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we definitely need some guardrails to protect artists from having their data scraped into a Gen AI model and then regurgitated out as something quote unquote new. I, I think Gen AI is fantastic. It's a fantastic conceptualization tool. For I'm not a traditional artist, right? I my storyboards are stick figures. If I need to convey an idea to my team, I'm going to look for similar images, right? I'm going to go grab a frame
Yeah,
from a movie and draw over it and be like, this is what I want. Gen AI allows me to, I'm a pretty decent writer. I can write out what I want to see and iterate and get pretty close on a conceptual level, and then I can go to my team. Here's what's in my head. Let's use Unreal or Cinema 4D or Maya or whatever to make this. But all of that gets thrown away, right? It's used for planning purposes, and it's not ever in the final product. I think that's a great use of it. And I know concept artists and storyboard artists all over the world are now screaming in terror, because that's exactly what they don't want us to use it for. The thing is, I run such a lean operation. I'm not in a position to hire a concept artist, right? My use of
yeah,
Gen
but that
AI,
will be always the discussion will always be around that, because you have that way of thinking of your reasons, and then other people will get offended by that because wait a second, but that's my job, right? But at the same time, probably they're going to use AI because it's just a tool that is out there, and there's no denying in that. Maybe they're going to use that in some way to help them out, but that will offend some other people. So there's like all of these people get offended because of this. So my approach when it comes to things like this, and it has been always my approach in life in general, I would say, I'm very pragmatic about like all these things and disruptions. You know what I mean? There's no point. I mean, I'm all for like people defending their rights. Of course, I mean, it's not even a question, right? But at the same time, I'm very pragmatic in terms of like, okay, if this is what we're dealing with, this is what I have to do. You know what I mean? There's no point on saying this could be different or could have been scenarios, because that's not the reality. The reality is one, and that's the one that we should take it. Again, I'm not saying that my way of doing things is the correct way. It's just my way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to continue having these discussions. I feel like the rest of the 2020s is going to be about this. Yeah, among
Yeah,
other things.
I
But
think so.
on a
Yeah.
tech standpoint, from a tech standpoint, I think it's going to be
But to illustrate
about
my
this.
point, and maybe this will be a little bit controversial, what I'm saying is, for example, when Midjourney came out, um, virtually there was not a single person that didn't produce an image with Midjourney, and that was not putting that image like out there on LinkedIn or whatever
Mhm.
other medium, right? Everybody was on it. Every single body was on. Every single person was on it, right? And then a great portion of these people, they were against it all of a sudden because of all these things. So it doesn't work like that, right? It's either like you either embrace it and then it's the best thing in the world, but next day it's like the worst thing in the world. I mean, it, I get the reasons,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you don't solve anything by going left, right, or hard, hard left or hard right. You know what I mean? I think, as I normally say, it's like the middle is where you want to be in terms of like it's the key word here is integration. You integrate these technologies into things that you're already doing. As painful as it is for some people involved, we are also part of the everyone.
Yeah.
The human race is involved in this. Let's not forget, right? We're
Right.
talking about like on the creative side, but human race is involved in all of these things as well, right?
Right.
Some of them, there's a clear advantage of using, machine learning and AI in general. For example, on the medical side of things, I think everybody can benefit with that kind of stuff. But the same technology will be disruptive in other areas, ours included, right?
Yeah.
But I think the best way to go forward is to be pragmatic about like this is happening, so we might as well just integrate this into our lives in the best way possible, and not going so hard right or hard left with these things, because we've had like other disruptions in the past in the
Mhm.
humankind, overall story, right? And people that took hard left and hard right probably, the story told us that they were not winning. They didn't
Yeah.
win, basically, right?
Yeah, the thing we need to remember is AI is our creation. Like we're the parent.
Yeah,
We're the parent, and if we're worried about how the kid is going to turn
yeah,
out, then we should really think about what we're putting into it as far as raising the child. So
yeah.
yeah, and no, this is a good discussion, and I think you're right about a lot of this stuff. I think there's always going to be people who say no AI, and there's going to be people who embrace it for what it is. And from my standpoint, like I wrote a policy on my website that was I call it my AI and machine learning policy, and it clearly states this is how we will use it, this is how we will not use it, and that's it. And I think that's everybody just needs to do that. And then if a client isn't comfortable with our use of AI, then they know, right? Okay, this is not the company that I want to work with, and that's
Yeah,
it.
fair
And
enough.
I've tried to address what I think. I always try to address, because I'm an indie filmmaker at heart. I always try to address what does that indie filmmaker out there who wants to hire me, what do they want, right? They want to. The reason they're independent filmmakers is because they want to make something that's handmade, that's bespoke, that is unique. They don't want cookie cutter, Gen AI VFX. If they did,
Yeah,
they would do it themselves with Midjourney and
yeah,
the Photoshop AI, and etc. Right? They wouldn't even be talking to me. But the ones who are talking to me, they want that handmade, you know, uh, that human input, right? They don't want Gen AI to be involved. So I'm planting my flag. Like this is my policy. Other companies, their policies may be different. Am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know. I'm right for me,
yeah.
and
Fair
I'm
enough.
right for the client that I want to pursue.
Yeah,
So let's steer
and
the
that's fair
conversation
enough.
back to that imaginary client. So you're in a pub, and a an independent filmmaker says, "Hey, I know you're in the VFX industry, and I'm writing an indie film, and I know I'm going to need VFX. I'm terrified. I'm scared. I've never done any visual effects before. It seems like a big, scary, involved process. Am I crazy? Should I just drop this idea, or what do I do? How do I start?"
Look, I don't know about your budget, but this is something that you need to consider for sure. So visual effects tend to be expensive. It all depends on the level of shots that has visual effects, because sometimes you can do things in camera that don't rely on visual effects work, and it still tells the story. So it all depends on how much you want to push visual effects and what are the reasons of why you want to do visual effects. So I mean, we could do this all day, right? We could have like a couple of hours of this role playing here. But what
Sure.
I'm trying to say, I guess, Paul, is um, which was something that I was about to say before, and then I forgot, which is visual effects should be used to enhance a story that either cannot be told otherwise or cannot be shown otherwise, because there's that visual aspect of the story to be conveyed, right? But it shouldn't be the focus of the film. The focus of the film should be the story, and this is most of the times. I would say 90% of films these days, they don't have a story that is appealing, that wants keep people watching. You know what I mean? That maybe they're watching because they heard that this actor or this actress is in there, or there's these crazy visual effects about this planet exploding or whatever, and they want to see it, or it's another Star Wars spin-off or whatever. All of those reasons, I mean, are fine with me, but no doubt that I think the center should be about the story, like reading a book. Nobody reads a book if the story is not good, right? Or at least if
Right.
if if, if it's a romance, or if it's something different that you just want to learn, like technical stuff with it, fine. But if it's something that is like a novel or whatever, the story needs to be there, right? Because otherwise, it's not going to be a book that people read. Same thing with movies, I would say,
Hmm. Agreed. Agreed.
right?
Can you talk about? I mean, that's how much better can I say that? That's what it's all about. Story is everything, and
Yeah,
everything we do in visual effects should be to support the story. When
yeah. But
VFX,
but that's not what happens most
I
of the
know,
time. That's basically what I'm saying.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, because the bigger studio based filmmaking is all about spectacle, and it's all about appealing to as broad an audience as possible across the world, not just in the US. It's one of the reasons I love indie film. It's because it is story first, character first. Everything we do is just to support that,
yeah,
and the more invisible my team and I can make our VFX to support that story, the better. I
yeah,
I it's one thing you go see Guardians of the Galaxy, the VFX are really really obvious, right? You go see
yeah,
an indie film where the VFX have just been done in a way to support the story. The To me, the best compliment that anybody can ever pay me is, what VFX, right? If they can't see what
yeah,
we did, then we did our job right. Um,
yeah.
so that, I think that's a great place for us to end here. So really briefly, what are you anything that you can talk about? What are you working on right now?
So I'm fully committed with CompLaIr. So we really are making a difference in the industry by basically supporting people that are really experienced, people that have been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, some of them sometimes more than that. They really want to make a difference when it comes to the management side of things in their leadership roles, or the ones that want to attain leadership roles. And that's basically my focus. And this is what we're doing. So people, if they would like to know more about like what we have to offer, they can go to our website. But one thing that anybody can do for free is go into a link that I can give you if you'd like to give to your audience. But they can also find that on our website, which is a scorecard, which is called Growth Ready Scorecard, which is basically a scorecard that tells them how much they are in the positive way of growing their careers. And they're going to receive a report at the end, a 9-page report with suggestions, taking into account their score and things, suggestions for them to get better at different aspects of their professional life, for them to be in the right path for growth in their careers, because that's basically what we're all about. It's making sure that everyone's career is on growth trajectory.
Oh, that's fantastic. What's the address? What's the URL for your for CompLaIr?
CompLaIrVFX.com. They can find us there for sure. Everything that we're all about, and then our YouTube channel, which we started with the podcast. We don't do the podcast anymore, but we have like a lot. Every week there's a new video coming out, more regarding the things that I just mentioned before: career growth and mindset for growth. Not only for experienced people, but for any type of professional that would like to grow in their careers.
That's great. You're doing a great service to the creative industry and to VFX folks. And as somebody who taught college for 20 years and mentored young people, like that is an invaluable thing. I really commend you on how you're sharing your knowledge and your expertise with people who are coming up in the industry. It's what people really need, and it's one of the reasons, like you said, why it's not always a good idea to start your career as a freelancer. You need mentorship. You need people to teach you what you don't know, right? And that's great.
You
So
don't know
if you're
what you
out,
don't know,
you
right?
don't know what you don't know, exactly. And so if you're a compositor or VFX professional out there in search of some sort of mentorship, Pedro and CompLaIr are a fantastic resource for you. So that brings this episode of VFX for Indies to a close. Thank you so much to my guest, Pedro Andrade, for being here with me today. And thank you for tuning into our discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment or a review, all the things. Every little bit helps us get the word out about our show. For Foxtrot X-Ray, I'm Paul DeNigris. Thanks so much for being part of the VFX for Indies community. See you next time.